Welcome to Live Vita, the show for women who are ready to break free from diet culture, nourish their bodies intuitively, and reconnect with their natural rhythms. I'm Shay, a registered holistic nutritionist and founder of the Vita Method, where I help women support their gut, hormones, and metabolism through practical, evidence-informed nutrition and lifestyle changes, all without the overwhelm. So whether you're struggling with bloating, energy crashes, metabolic imbalances, or just feeling confused and out of sync with your body, you're in the right place. Here we'll talk about real nourishment, metabolism, slow living, and everything in between. I'm so glad you're here. Let's dive in. Hello. Welcome back to the Live Vita podcast. I'm so excited to be here with you guys. This is season 2. It is a nice October day right now. The podcast took a nice little pause at the end of summer, which was somewhat unintentional, but I thought, hey, why don't we just stop it here? I had a nice rounded out 10 episodes, so now we are back. I'm starting a season 2. We will be with you every other Sunday, so make sure you subscribe, hit that like button, leave me a little comment, leave me a little 5 stars if you like what I'm doing here. I would love to have your feedback. You can follow me along. I changed my Instagram handle recently, so if you are listening to earlier episodes, I keep changing things a little bit. I'm sorry. It's just who I am. But if you want to follow me on Instagram now, my Instagram handle is live.vita. So that's live.vyta. You can find me on there. I am in my DMs. I answer your messages. I respond to comments. I'm not a bot, and I won't have bots responding to you anytime soon. So if you want to chat, come chat with me there. But today we are talking all about seasonal eating in the context of moving in towards autumn and in towards winter. This isn't a full winter episode. This is more of an autumn episode. I would hope to do a winter episode coming soon. But right now the leaves are changing. We got like nice reds and oranges. The nights are getting really cool. There's a bite in the air that's making me kind of be like, maybe I should turn the heat on. So there's this craving for warmth and slow and kind of snuggling down in thick blankets, cracking open some books, lighting a candle. There's a nice smell of autumn in the air. And I personally have noticed that my appetite, energy, and moods have been shifting with the season. So I don't know if you've noticed this as well, but I'm wanting to slow down. I'm wanting to sleep a little bit longer. I'm wanting to go to bed a bit earlier. It's getting dark earlier. I'm not feeling as motivated to stay up because I don't have that light cue. And I find that also when the TV's on or I'm on my phone and it's gotten dark outside, I really am noticing the disconnect and feeling like, hey, this is too bright. This is too much light. It's supposed to be dark right now and I need to wind this down. So autumn we can really look at as a season of preparation for what we will discuss later, but sort of a hibernation state, which we will enter into winter. So preparation in autumn can be for the body and the mind to slow down, nourish, and we're going to start actually thinking about it as the days get darker and shorter, your body wants to go into this rest and repair mode. So we want to try and support that as much as we can. And I know with the lifestyles that we all live and the society that we live in and the cities and all the things, it can be very difficult. I went out last night to look at the full harvest moon and I had to hide behind some trees and stuff so there wasn't bright city lights shining into my eyes while I wanted to look at the moon. So we have to make do with what we have and do our best. And we're going to talk a little bit about what we can do in this episode. So stay tuned and here we go. So your body naturally shifts into the autumn. Metabolism tends to slow down a little bit. We become maybe a little bit more introspective. There's more of an appetite for dense foods, warming foods, nourishing foods. Everybody on Instagram right now is like, I'm all about the soup. And we're all kind of craving like broth, soup, stews, roasted vegetables, warm oatmeal, baked apples. Things like that. There becomes a natural shift where we start craving these foods a little bit more and shifting out of the summer foods. And summer foods being, the densely hydrating foods like watermelon and berries and things like that. And for me personally, I noticed this a couple weeks ago where I suddenly was like, I don't want any of that anymore. I'm not craving that. I'm actually really craving stewed apples and a fresh pear. And I've been doing a lot of custard oats in the morning. So there's a reason why this happens. And basically, as we transition, your body starts craving warming foods. And this is because it's going to help aid in digestion, increase your circulation. But the warmth is actually going to support your reproductive system as a woman, which is going to help support your adrenal function by keeping your body warm and nourished. So again, part of this is that as the temperatures are dropping, your body's using more energy to keep itself warm. So eating foods with like a higher calorie content, more nutrient density, and with heat are going to contribute to energy and heat within your body. So we also can look at it through the point of thermogenesis, which is basically the process of digesting and absorbing food. So certain foods like warm foods, higher protein density foods, they actually increase the thermogenesis in the body, which helps the body stay warm. One of the things we look for as a vital sign in metabolism is that when you eat food, does the food make you feel warm? If you're eating food and the food makes you feel cold, or you feel cold after eating, there's a sign there that your metabolism isn't responding appropriately to that food, and that can be one of the vital signs that we actually look for. There's also psychological and cultural reasons, of course, why we crave these warm foods. Like there's a nostalgia and tradition associated with the autumn season and the types of foods that we have there. So part of it is that, and then there's also the seasonal cue with less sunlight, different activities. The sunlight is a modulator of serotonin in our bodies. So when we have less sunlight, our bodies tend to shift to looking for other sources of serotonin, which can be things like higher carbs and warm foods that kind of create a little bit of an internal boost. And we'll get into the physiology of women a little bit later, but it's also particularly important for the reproductive system to have this warm food. In traditional Chinese medicine, a fertile environment for conception requires a warm womb with a good blood supply. So cold foods can constrict capillaries, restricting circulation and nutrient flow to the endometrium. Whereas when we keep things warm, we keep things fluid, like thinking hydrating broths, food that actually hydrates you. And in the winter and autumn, that would be things like broths and soups. That is keeping that blood flow throughout the body into the womb space and supporting a fertile environment. And again, as I've said through many episodes, even if you're not interested in getting pregnant, even if that's not in the cards for you or not something you want, this is still essential to female physiology and optimal health for a woman. So let's actually talk about what's in season, what's the reason for the things in season, and what are the benefits. Why eat in season? So I once had a colleague from Chile who commented on how the imported fruit that we get here tastes nothing like it does back home. She was eating fruit that was imported from Chile, but didn't taste at all like how she remembered it. And I think with all things, it's good to be moderate and remain flexible. You know, my personal dream would be have some land and be, kind of largely self-sustaining, growing a lot of my own food. But like most people, I live in a city, I shop at the grocer, I get to markets when I'm able, and I'm surrounded by food abundance 24/7. So living in this pseudo environment means that it's easy to eat whatever we want, whenever we want. This sends our bodies mixed messages, though, if we are doing this, depending on the climate we're in. So if you're buying, tropical fruit and it is cold outside, dark outside, that is sending a mixed message to your body. And of course, I won't get into ultra-processed foods here, but constant food abundance and food availability obviously can be a problem for our metabolisms because we don't want to be eating all the time, especially if we're not eating nutrient-dense foods as the primary foods that we choose. So one of the foundational things that I teach is that for good health, for vitality, for regenerative energy, we need to be incorporating foods that are in season and local and ancestrally consistent, as well as taking to mind how to prepare these foods traditionally. Now, flexibility is another important factor. We don't live in the world our ancestors live in. They had forced famines where it's like, well, we're just out of food. We just got to eat what's in storage. Whereas we don't have that. We can literally go to the store, maybe 24 hours, and we can buy a bag of chips, whatever you want. You can get it. And so we need to sort of balance this in ourselves, which is something that only you can decide for yourself of like how you want to approach this. But overall, choosing foods that are ancestrally consistent, local, and in season for where you live is going to give you the most vitality that you can get out of the foods. And then of course, let's make space for having things like your favorite treats or whatever those may be. Like everybody has something that they're like, oh, but I really love this, but that isn't aligned with that way of eating. And it's like, you know what? It's better to just have the thing and not stress out about it than it is to constantly feel like you can't have something and live in that sort of restrictive mindset. So that's a whole other conversation. But just so you guys are aware of sort of like how I think about these things. So if you're coming from eating a lot of convenience foods or processed foods, then focusing on whole foods that you could theoretically farm, fish, hunt, grow, or maybe forage, that's a really great place to start. Getting concerned about where it comes from, if it's local, if it's sustainable, if it's ancestrally consistent, that can come later if that concern even comes at all. You know, lots of people do very well just eating a moderately seasonal diet based on whole foods that are in the grocery store. So, you know, start where you're at and what makes sense for you and what aligns with like your values and where you're at. I think the last, several years have shown us a lot about the weak points in our global economic chain, and learning to be more self-sustaining, even if you live in a city, can provide a bit more security and confidence while also supporting those hardworking people who produce our food locally. So the more zeroed in we can become on local foods, the more harmonic our bodies can become with the environment, creating microbiome variability and providing the nutrients that we need for the season that we're in. That being said, never become so rigid that you're miserable. I drink coffee, every day, and certainly coffee does not grow where I live, but I also source it through a local roastery, and they're sourcing it ethically, and they're supporting farmers elsewhere while I'm supporting a local business who imports these beans and roasts these beans. So we can't be perfect in anything, so don't even try, but do your best and figure out what's important to you, then start with that. And let's get into one of the little nuances here, but I had someone on Instagram ask me, people say fruit is meant for summer seasonally, but that doesn't make sense. They ripen in autumn, and when stored, they become a winter food. Do you agree? And so again, context here really matters. It depends on the fruit and where you live. So some climates have virtually no fruit come December or January, where other climates, like where I live, do have winter fruits. And in general, cold weather will be more insulin resistant and will do better with lower carbohydrates compared to summer and early autumn. But also just knowing like what's in season for where you live. So a lot of berries come into harvest earlier in the year. There's sometimes 2 harvests on that, but we don't need to get overly complicated here. Like berries, generally a summer food, eat them into fall, like September, into late September, October, November, we're looking at like apples and pears and things and more squashes. And then where I live, January is great because we have kiwis that grow here, and the kiwi harvest comes in January, and I'm eating so many kiwis, and it's great because they're full of vitamin C, which is going to support my immune system and so many other things in the winter. But let's get into the actual benefits of why somebody might want to eat seasonally other than the overall ethos and economic reasons. Okay, so if you've listened to earlier episodes, particularly episode 2, my Rewild Your Gut episode, you will learn all about the microbiome. But one of the reasons that we love to eat seasonally is because it ensures that you're getting a wide variety of foods and nutrients throughout the year. So this is going to benefit your microbiome by providing ample diversity throughout the year. Feasting on berries in the summer, turning to root vegetables and slow cooking in the autumn and winter, microgreens and leafy things in the early spring, each season has its rotation. And it's actually very beneficial to eat the same foods over and over for a period of time, particularly when they're in season, because they have the highest nutrient density when they are grown in the correct season and harvest in the correct season. So you're getting a variety of nutrients, you're getting a variety of sort of quote unquote quantum signatures from that fruit, where it's holding a certain, let's say, code in its own mitochondria, its own DNA that is taken into your body and being translated. So it is basically aligning your body with the environment. And I like to think of it this way, is that your gut is basically a guardian, and your gut is taking the outside world into the inside world and deciding what gets to pass through. So when we eat food, it basically goes down a tube. It remains on the outside of our body, if you can picture this, because technically there's a tube running through your body that's keeping the actual inside of your body separate from inside that tube. And so when you eat food, it goes through the tube and then your body essentially decides like, hey, we're going to break this down and bring it in, or nope, we don't want this, and then maybe you have like IBS or diarrhea and it flushes right out, or maybe you throw up right away if it's something that really doesn't agree with you. That's an extreme example, but as you can see, the gut is kind of the guardian and it brings the outside world inside. So when we're choosing our foods, it's nice to choose foods that sort of align with the environment, because your body is constantly receiving cues from the environment, from the light, from the temperature. So choosing seasonal foods can be another way that kind of cues your body to understand the season that it's in. And I won't go like super deep into this concept here, but plants contain mitochondria, and your mitochondria in your body as well as in the plants basically react to the environment. In plants, they're converting light into chemical energy, and that chemical energy that is converted in the plants is actually what you are taking into your body to turn into energy in your body. So that chemical energy is essentially glucose, and then it's taken into your body and turned into energy that your mitochondria use. And you can kind of think of this as a very quantum idea of communication, but I won't talk about that more here. If you're interested in that topic, please let me know, because I would love to craft an episode all about that quantum communication. But basically, we want to eat things that make sense to our bodies, that they can communicate effectively with each other, so we are not rejecting them, so we're not having all these problems arise out of eating in a way that is not aligned with our physiology. And of course, if you're eating like strawberries in the winter, that's probably not the worst offense ever, but we want to look at things as a whole picture. It's like, how aligned is your overall eating pattern with the season? Are you still eating a highly processed food diet? Or are you eating like a pretty much sustainable local diet, and then sometimes you're enjoying strawberries in the middle of winter? Like, there's a lot of context to unpack here. So if you're like, oh, this is making me feel a little anxious, like, don't worry about it. Like I said, just focus on eating whole foods as you can, from the grocery store. It's all good. This is just to provide a bigger picture and more context, and to give you the option to go deeper if you would like to. We can also look at it as eating seasonally is a lot more sustainable. So eating seasonally helps lower the environmental toll associated with food transportation, because foods that are in season can be purchased more locally. Now, if you're living in a big city, they might still be coming from a little bit further away. But if you're living in smaller cities, or cities that are close to farmland or have a lot of farmers markets, this can be a really great option. It helps you learn what's in season, as well as support the people who are producing food in your area, which is a very thankless job. Nobody is going out there and shaking the farmers' hands. I mean, like, thank you so much for your work and your toil to feed us, and they work hard. I know farmers, it's a 24/7 job. Honestly, something goes wrong, you are responding to that. So, showing some appreciation for them by actually spending a couple more dollars than you normally would on their hard earned food product that they have grown with like so much care and attention and then brought to a farmer's market can be a really great way to support your local economy, support your farmers, also learn to eat locally, and also have way more nutrient density and way more cohesion with the food that you're eating. So that food was grown, close to you in an environment that is similar to yours. It's not food that's being transported halfway across the globe, picked before it's ripe, transported, all of this stuff that goes into transporting food, which is kind of like a scary process sometimes, and then sold to you, and then maybe it never even ripens at home. Like, how many of you have had those bananas, you buy them, you're like, these are gonna be so great, and then they just like never ripen? Or other fruits that you buy and they just like never really ripen and they're never really good. So one reason why we want to focus on more seasonal, local, sustainable food is that it reduces that energy cost needed for refrigeration during transportation and storage. It's just supporting your local community. And it doesn't mean you can't go buy bananas. Like, I certainly buy bananas periodically, but it's just learning to eat in a different way and really embrace what each season has to offer. And with that, eating seasonally is often more cost effective. So the great news is that it's also good for your bank account. Like, the simple concept of supply and demand states that as the supply of an item increases, the cost will go down. And this often happens with food. So when a food is in season, there's a lot more of it. So grocery stores will be able to price at a lower cost. If you have a local grocery store or a farm-oriented grocery store, a lot of the time you can see like where food is coming from, and you start getting a sense of what's in season based on what is on sale. So that's another really good tip, is a lot of the times the things that are on sale are actually the things that are in season. Not always, but often, because they have so much of it that they need to move the product before it goes bad. And as I mentioned earlier, the foods are actually higher in nutrients when they're in season. So we're going to get into some specific foods that are in season for early autumn, late autumn, and moving into winter, like December. And there's actually a lot of research for this. I have somewhere on my Instagram page more information about this, but basically if you have a broccoli grown in season and picked at its peak freshness, it has more vitamin C in it than a broccoli grown out of season. And this is going to be reflected in all our fruits and vegetables. When they are grown in season, picked in season, they have more nutrient density than foods that are grown in a greenhouse or forced to grow just for the supply-demand issue. Because, of course, if we are all demanding fruit in December or January, then producers are going to try and make that happen, and they're going to do that in greenhouses. That's why you get strawberries that are all white on the inside when they're not in season. I wouldn't even personally eat those because A, they don't really taste like much, and B, they don't have very many nutrients in them. Whereas you get a nice fresh summer strawberry that's like grown from your friend's backyard, that thing is like dripping with juice, dark red on the inside, and stains your fingers. That is a really good sign that that food actually has a lot of nutrients and a lot of the phytonutrients in it that your body craves. Like, if your fruit is able to stain your fingers, your berries are staining your fingers, that is a sign that they have those phytonutrients that are actually the antioxidants and the things that we are looking for when we eat those foods. All right, so what are some of the superstar foods of autumn? One of them, where I live, because I live by ocean and rivers and lakes, lucky me, salmon is a wonderful thing that comes into season where we are. And I think it's very interesting. This has interested me for a long time. But the salmon run actually coincides with when our UVB light goes away. So if you guys don't know, UVB light is the light that allows our bodies to create vitamin D. So here where I live on Vancouver Island, we are only able to create vitamin D through sunlight from March until mid-October. And around mid-October is when the salmon run really takes off. Now, what's interesting about this, of course, is that means the salmon are now in season for harvesting, essentially. Like, if we were looking at this through an ancestral lens, that's when we would be going down to the rivers and trying to catch some salmon when they're doing their salmon run. Of course, doing this in a sustainable way and a respectful way to nature, so we're not depleting the salmon. That is a really big issue with over-demand. But just to illustrate how nature provides, salmon are going to be a wonderful source of vitamin D come autumn and winter, when we no longer can make that vitamin D from the sun. They also have lots of omega-3s, and we're going to get a little bit into the interesting facts around omega-3, omega-6, polyunsaturated fats, and whatnot a little bit later, so stay tuned. But they have lots of omega-3s in them, which are going to support the immune system, the mood, energy regulation, and this is basically an ancestral signal. It's like, hey, the salmon are running, winter is coming, I'm gonna catch and eat that fish, and that's gonna help me out. And maybe, historically we wouldn't really know why, but now we can say, oh, the salmon start running, and that's our source of vitamin D for the winter. So very interesting. And then where I live, rose hips and sea buckthorn become a really great source of vitamin C this time of year. That would be sort of our ancestral go-to for vitamin C. Of course, not the most accessible or easiest thing to prepare for people. So, Citruses also come into season in winter, but they are imported. So there's nuance here as well. Like, you can eat imported foods, of course. I'm not saying don't do that. But the goal of this episode is really to highlight the things that are in season for autumn. And that might be things that are locally available, but it also might be things you find in the grocery store. So for example, as we get further into winter, oranges come into season. That is their growing season, that is their harvest season. So the oranges that we're getting at the grocery store come winter are going to be a lot juicier, sweeter, and nutrient rich than the oranges that we've been getting through the summer. I actually just bought some oranges recently because I was really craving them. And I was very disappointed, because when I cut them open, it's like they weren't really juicy. They didn't have a lot of hydration to them. They didn't have a lot of flavor. They were kind of just like fibrous. And I was like, oh, like these aren't ready yet. So I probably won't buy any oranges again for the next little while, and I will wait until they become into more peak of their season. But like I said, rose hips and sea buckthorn, they're going to offer a lot of vitamin C, and we want this vitamin C basically year round, but it's very important in winter, of course, for your immunity, but also for regulating your cortisol and supporting progesterone, as well as fertility. Vitamin C is one of those things that I think a lot of us probably don't get enough of because we're not eating enough of these fruits. We're not eating enough like fermented cabbage. We're just not eating enough of our vegetables and our fruits that have vitamin C. And it's so crucial for the integrity of your joints and your ligaments and your skin and hair and nails, because vitamin C is also what helps direct collagen in the body and collagen synthesis. So if you're having issues with like sticky joints or feeling like you have tight connective tissue or just feeling like tight overall, this could be in part due to not enough vitamin C in your body, not enough ability of your body to create proper collagen structure, and maybe a little bit of dehydration, so your fascia is not actually fully hydrated. But vitamin C, I think everybody should just get some more of that stuff in their diet because it'll probably do wonders for you. Another thing that's in season around this time are pears and apples. And pears are super rich in moisture. So I said earlier, like, very important to try and eat your hydration. This is an idea put forth by a woman who goes by Andra Naturopathy on Instagram. Shout out to her. She has a lot of really great educational content. But pears are rich in moisture, and their sorbitol content helps improve and soothe digestion. And apples contain pectin in the skins, which is super wonderful for soothing the gut. They're very nourishing, and they also have the polyphenols, including quercetin and quercetin, which neutralize free radicals, protect cells from damage, and can work as an antihistamine for seasonal allergies. So if you have a lot of seasonal allergy transitions, eating foods that are rich in quercetin can be really beneficial because it actually helps reduce that histamine response. And then one of the fruits that we are all obsessed with right now is pomegranate. And it is one of the best fruits for fertility and vitality. Its deep red color sort of mirrors the blood flow support that it offers. It offers certain components that have polyphenols with potential antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and anti-carcinogenic effects. And the antioxidant potential of pomegranate juice is actually more than that of red wine or green tea. So a very easy thing that I've been doing that I really enjoy is using pomegranate juice to make my gelatin gummies. And if you would like a good recipe for that, just send me a DM on Instagram. I will be happy to send you my gummy recipe. But it's a delicious way to get all those nutrients from the pomegranate without just drinking juice all the time. I think one of the most fascinating things about nutrition is that you could literally pick a food from nature, like a pomegranate, an orange, a wild yam, like carrots, like whatever you want to choose. You could literally pick any food and you could just find so much information about that food and how it works in the body and what kind of like nutrients it has, what kind of phytonutrients it has, what are its antioxidant potentials. But basically the thing that is consistent across most fruits and vegetables, if not all of them, is that they all are really, really good for us. They're great for the immune system. They are great for anti-cancer. They're great for anti-inflammatory. They have all of these wonderful benefits. And really the end result of all of this is that we just need to eat more fruits and vegetables. And this isn't like to say we need to be plant-based, because if you've listened to anything I've said in other episodes, or if you know anything about me, you know that I was vegan for a while, you know I was plant-based for over 6 years, and you know that I really feel strongly that it does not work for physiology. I do think we need animal products, 100%. But that being said, we shouldn't just be eating meat all the time, especially just muscle meat all the time. That's a really good way to become very inflamed. We need lots of balance, and looking to the natural world, looking to what would be abundant and available in the place that we live is a really great way to get an idea of what we should be eating. But basically, long story short, more fruits and vegetables, never going to be a problem. If you can't digest them, that's a different problem, but we can work on that. Okay, my last shout out for seasonal food that I wanted to talk about was root vegetables and winter squash. So your nice orange squashes, your pumpkins, your yams, all of these things, very rich in beta carotene, and that's going to support the immune system by acting as a precursor to vitamin A, which is going to boost cell function, immune cell function, as well as reduce oxidative stress through the antioxidant properties. So studies also show that this can enhance lymphocyte and natural killer cell activity, particularly in the elderly, and helps contribute to a balanced immune response against infections. So definitely make your grandma some winter squash soup, and that is probably going to help her out. Now, I just want to throw a little caveat here is that beta carotene doesn't always convert very well to vitamin A for a lot of people, especially if you have slow metabolic function, if your thyroid is a little sluggish, it's not going to be a reliable source of vitamin A. So again, like I just said, I do believe we need animal products in the diet, and that you should be getting your retinol, your vitamin A, from animal products. But foods containing beta carotene are a wonderful support to the body, and let's just leave it there. So one other thing that comes into season in the fall are going to be your nuts and your seeds. And we're going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, but first of all, I'm going to say I stand by the concept of reducing excess PUFAs in the diet. If you don't know what a PUFA is, it is polyunsaturated fatty acids. But I'm not against eating fish. I'm not against eating nuts or seeds. I do think that we need to understand the greater, broader context of these foods, however, because if you are slamming peanut butter every day, eating it by the spoon, you're living off trail mix, that may be a little bit of a problem. Now, especially this is going to be a problem if you were doing this in the context of a standard diet, or if you're doing this in the context of a traditional clean diet where you're eating mostly plants, mostly vegetables, and then you are crushing the nuts and seeds to get your proteins and your fats. So these foods naturally come into season in the late fall, which is biologically appropriate for people living with defined environmental seasons. So of course, if you're living by the equator, things are going to be very different for you than people who live with a 4-season climate. I live in a 4-season climate, so that's what this is all about. Nuts and seeds would not be available year-round. So the fact that we have them available year-round is your first kind of like, oh, this is interesting. They would only really be available through autumn and winter, and maybe we have a little bit left over into the early spring. But by spring, we're transitioning to other things in our diet. So in nature, polyunsaturated fatty acids are part of what triggers hibernation. So when we're talking about PUFAs, which I'm going to say from now on, I am talking about things with a very high omega-6. So they have a very high omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, higher than 4:1. So things like macadamia, pecan, cashews, pistachio, hazelnuts, pumpkin seeds, pine nuts, sunflower seeds, Brazil nuts, almonds, even walnuts, all of these things have a higher omega-6 to omega-3 ratio than what we would call an ancestrally consistent ratio. So we want more omega-3 than omega-6 within our bodies and within our diet. So omega-3s, of course, come in these foods, but they're not necessarily the best source of your omega-3s. You're going to get a better source of omega-3s from your seafood. And the reason why we want this ratio to be higher omega-3 and lower omega-6 is because omega-6, when in excess, can contribute to chronic inflammation. But let's talk a little bit about the hibernation quality that I'm speaking of. So in nature, PUFAs help animals slow their metabolism and enter torpor, a state where the body temperature drops and the heart rate slows down to conserve energy throughout winter. In humans, that same mechanism can help us slow down temporarily. So when our system says that we need to go into hibernation mode, things slow down. And if we are in a state that is chronically telling our bodies, hey, we need to slow down and conserve energy, this often happens with modern diets. It can show up as chronic fatigue, low thyroid activity, or chronic inflammation. Worse, it can show up as a combination of all three of these things. A low body temperature and a slow pulse are some of the vital signs that we look for to see if somebody has a reduced metabolic activity or reduced metabolic capability. The thyroid literally slows things down to sustain life, and that will be reflected in a low pulse, slow pulse, as well as low body temperature, cold extremities, and honestly, just like a little bit of a hibernating person. You're going to be tired and things are going to take your energy away from you very easily because honestly, your biggest internal dialogue is like, oh my God, I just want to go to bed. So this is one of the reasons that we want to be mindful of our omega-6 PUFA intake, commonly found in seed oils, highly processed foods, and even in clean staples like nut butters and trail mixes. Because animal studies have shown that high PUFA diets, especially rich in omega-6s, increase the length and depth of hibernation. And in humans, when omega-6 to omega-3 ratio gets too high, which it often does with these modern diets, the standard American diet, the ratio is about 10-1 instead of the ideal, which is 3-1. That is 10-1 omega-6 to omega-3 versus 3-1 omega-6 to omega-3. So this can contribute to a sluggish metabolism and basically an internal cue of like, we need to hibernate and slow down. And part of that, I speculate, maybe because the body can repair itself in sleep and rest. And when you have this high ratio, you have a lot of chronic inflammation, you have a lot of things kind of going haywire. And so the body's imperative is like, we need to go and rest so we can recover. But you never really get that rest or that recovery because the modern lifestyle just keeps grinding things out. So you can think of omega-6 rich foods, like I listed off a bunch of nuts earlier. They're seasonal foods and they're meant to be eaten occasionally, not consistently. And we also want to think of it in the context of like, what is the greater diet looking like? So having nuts and seeds and whatnot in your diet is not really a problem. They have lots of nutrients in and of themselves. So we don't want to demonize our nuts and seeds, but we do want to eat them sparingly. They're not meant to be eaten all the time. They're not meant to be the staple of your diet. And although humans don't hibernate per se, and nor are we capable of hibernating like a bear, some researchers have speculated that chronic fatigue syndrome is like the body attempting to hibernate. The metabolism slows down to survive environmental stress at the cost of energy, vitality, and quality of life. I've talked a lot about thyroid in episode 6 and episode 7. If you want to learn a little bit more about how thyroid responds to environment and how it is the timekeeper in your body, I would recommend going and listening to episode 6. But we can draw some interesting comparisons here with the high omega-6 fatty acids and hibernation in animals like bears, as well as how chronic fatigue sort of manifests. Now, studies have shown that chronic fatigue is often accompanied by an increased omega-6 fatty acid ratio, particularly linoleic acid and arachidonic acid. Both of those are known to drive a lot of inflammatory processes. And in addition to that, lower omega-3 ratios. So the more skewed this ratio becomes, the worse the fatigue, the pain, and the cognitive symptoms are for that person dealing with their chronic fatigue. And this is something that is very measurable. They've actually found that it's a significant difference in people who are experiencing chronic fatigue compared to healthy controls for this omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. So if you are feeling like, hey, I am always tired and maybe even I have chronic fatigue, this might be a really great place to start with looking at the fatty acids in your diet. So on the flip side, omega-3 PUFAs, the ones found in cold water fish, those can help reduce inflammation, improve joint mobility, support skin health, and even stabilize the mood during darker months. But it's important to remember that you can't simply out-eat an omega-6 ratio by adding more omega-3. You have to actually remove all that excessive omega-6, which is often done by removing and avoiding seed oils in the diet. Like, I hate to use the word seed oils because it's become so taboo and controversial, but like, hey, there is a lot of science to say like omega-6 in excess maybe are not the greatest thing in our bodies. They are vital, absolutely. Omega-6 is vital in the body, but we just don't want this crazy ratio of a 10-to-1, right? We want to get closer to that 4-to-1, 3-to-1. That is a good ratio to have. So we can't just add excessive amounts of omega-3 to balance out the omega-6. You need to actually remove the things that are contributing to that overload of omega-6 in your diet, and then start adding in the things that have the omega-3. When you get to a more supportive state, you can rebalance and readdress and reassess what you want to do. But if you remove these things and you notice, hey, I'm feeling a lot better, then that is your N=1. That is your personal experience and your personal experiment. And you can say, like, this worked for me. And I know it has worked for hundreds and thousands of people because I've seen that anecdotal evidence all over the place. And although humans don't actually hibernate, I think we'll discover that autumn and winter are biologically designed for slowing down, sort of a seasonal metabolic reset. I think we'll see this with the rise of circadian biology and sort of quantum biology starting to come more into the mainstream. But modern life really fights that rhythm, and especially for women, like, we already are having to live on a 24-hour clock as opposed to a 28-day clock. So this mismatch can create a constellation of symptoms, and those can look like fatigue and burnout and low metabolism. And sometimes that is just from being in the modern lifestyle, and you have to actually find ways to change what is going on in your environment and what is going on outside of your own life. So personally, when I was vegan and I was eating a very high omega-6 diet, I did experience many symptoms of fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. I had, excessive tiredness, pain, low energy. I had a lot of problems. I had a long list of symptoms I was experiencing in my body, mostly invisible. And once I cut out omega-6 dense foods for a few years, I did notice a massive shift in my energy, mood, and physical ease. But that wasn't the only thing that I did, but that was a very crucial piece of it. So when I talk about seasonal eating and bioenergetic nutrition, this is kind of what I mean. The foods, the fats, the rhythms that support life and vitality actually change with the seasons and change with the internal season of your body. And when we honor that, the metabolism and your energy and your vitality find its natural rhythm. So starting small, changing your light environment or removing these omega-6s from your diet, or just focusing more on local and seasonal foods, choose one thing that you feel like would be the biggest game changer for you and try it out for a little while and see how it feels. So I invite you to notice what's in season this week, create one warming ritual or meal, and observe how your body responds. I would love to see what you try out. Tag me on Instagram, come say hello. Again, my handle is at live.vita, that is at live.vyta, and I am on Instagram, and I am happy to see you. Tag me and let me know what you're going to try. Until next time, thanks for tuning in.